comprehensive and balanced data evaluation plan, we want to think about both student or outcome data, and we also want to think about implementation data. One way to think about this is that this will give us information about how that our adults are doing with the different practices and systems that we have determined that we want to put in place. One way to think about how all that this work is organized is to think through this lens of data, systems, and practices. So we are talking about implementation data specifically. You've already thought some about what are the different practices that we want to put in place to support our students. You've also thought about what are the systems or the teaming structures that we want to put in place to help support our staff so that they can support our students. The focus of this section will be on how to put different implementation data collection in place so that we can make sure that we have the systems and the practices in place to support all of our students and all of our staff. One of the first things that your team will do together, or your school leadership team will do together, is to select the different tools that you may use to look across literacy, math, and behavior. It would be recommended that we go at a pace that works for us. We would not recommend you trying to do everything at one time. But so one of the first steps would be, what are the different tools that we want to use so that we know how that our staff are doing in terms of putting some of these different practices in place. And it could be that we're looking again at literacy or reading. It could be that we're starting with math, or it could be that we're starting with behavior. After we determine the tool, another thing that our school leadership team would want to do is to make sure that we have a calendar for when that we will collect this information. Sometimes we think about fidelity checks or implementation checks. This will be information that helps to guide where that we go next in supporting our staff. A third thing that our school leadership team would want to make sure and do would be to make certain that we have implementation data as an agenda item during our monthly meetings. One thing before that we would be discussing implementation data, we would want to have thought about, what do we need so that we can actually use this data? So it could be that we need to make sure that the format that we're getting the data back in is helpful for our team so that then we can use this data for problem-solving implementation. A fourth thing that our school leadership team would want to think about is establishing strong, effective feedback loops or two-way communication between our staff and our school leadership team. When we're thinking about implementation data and how that we're going to use that, it's important for us to think about how that information will be used to guide future training and coaching with our staff. It's important for us to remember that this information is to help us with planning, and none of it is to be intended as evaluative in terms of staff performance, but more from the perspective of how that we're growing and supporting our adults in this work. A final piece to think about in terms of implementation data and feedback loops would be how that we're communicating our implementation planning and also our progress in implementation with both our families and our community.